Before Samson ever lifted a hand in battle, before anyone feared his name, his story had already begun with a promise. His birth was not an accident, not a surprise. God chose him before he could choose anything for himself. Samson was set apart, marked for a purpose, called to live differently from everyone around him. From the very beginning, his life carried weight, meaning, and responsibility. And with that calling came a gift unlike any other supernatural strength that could not be explained by muscle or training. It was power that came from God. Samson's uncut hair became the visible sign of that calling. It wasn't magic. It wasn't the source of his strength. It was a reminder, a symbol, that his life belonged to God. Every strand was meant to remind him that his strength was borrowed, not owned. That his power came with boundaries. That his gift required obedience. But as Samson grew older, the meaning behind the symbol began to fade, and the gift itself took center stage. When Samson moved, people noticed. When he fought, enemies fell. He tore a lion apart with his bare hands, as if it were nothing. He defeated groups of armed men alone. Victory followed him wherever he went. And slowly, subtly, confidence turned into pride. What began as gratitude became assumption. Samson didn't wake up one day and decide to abandon God. He simply stopped paying attention. He started believing the strength was his, that the rules didn't really apply to him, that consequences were for other people. Samson's greatest weakness was never a lack of power. It was a lack of discipline. He followed his desires wherever they led, even when every warning sign was flashing. He ignored wise voices. He brushed off concern. He treated temptation like a game, confident he could step away whenever he wanted. But temptation doesn't announce when it becomes dangerous. It waits until you're comfortable, distracted, and sure of yourself. Over time, Samson's gift stopped shaping his character and started excusing his behavior. He kept winning battles, so he assumed everything was fine. He kept surviving consequences, so he believed there would always be another escape. Strength covered what obedience once protected, and that illusion lasted until it didn't. Then Delilah entered his life. She wasn't just another relationship. She was a slow unraveling. The Philistines knew Samson couldn't be defeated by force, so they tried something else. They sent Delilah, not with weapons, but with questions. Not with armies, but with persistence. Again and again, she asked him where his strength came from. And again, Samson played with the truth. He lied. He joked. He tested the edge, inching closer each time. What's haunting about Samson's story is that he wasn't deceived all at once. He wasn't tricked suddenly. He chose compromise repeatedly. Each lie felt harmless. Each step closer to the truth felt controlled. He believed he was still in charge. But the more he stayed near temptation, the weaker his resistance became. Eventually, worn down and careless, Samson did what he never should have done. He gave away the secret, not just of his hair, but of his calling. He trusted what was dangerous. He surrendered what was sacred. And that night, while he slept peacefully, unaware, Delilah had his hair cut. The symbol of his devotion was removed quietly, without a struggle. When Samson woke up, he expected the same result as always. The same strength, the same power, the same victory. He stood up ready to fight, confident that nothing had changed. But something had. And the most terrifying part is that he didn't realize it. The Bible says he did not know that the Lord had left him. That line carries a weight that echoes far beyond Samson's life. To lose strength is painful. To lose sight is tragic. But to lose God's presence without noticing, that is devastating. Samson assumed God's power would always be available, no matter how careless he became. But gifts misused eventually fade. The Philistines captured him. There was no struggle this time. No miracle, no escape. They gouged out his eyes, stripping him of sight, dignity, and freedom. The man who once struck fear into armies was led away, helpless and blind. He was chained and forced to grind grain like an animal, mocked by the same enemies who once trembled at his name. In the darkness of that prison, Samson finally had nothing left to rely on. No strength, no reputation, no freedom, no pride. Only silence, only regret, only time. And sometimes, it's in that silence where truth finally breaks through. As days passed, something small but significant began to happen. Samson's hair started to grow back, slowly, quietly, unnoticed by others. But more importantly, something else was growing: humility, dependence, awareness. For the first time in his life, Samson wasn't distracted by power or praise. He was forced to sit with his failure, to confront the cost of his choices, to recognize how far he had drifted. Samson didn't blame others anymore. He didn't boast. He didn't argue. He learned what strength without obedience leads to. He learned that gifts are not proof of approval. He learned that calling does not cancel responsibility. And in that broken place, Samson turned back to God not with confidence, but with desperation. One day, the Philistines gathered to celebrate his downfall. They brought Samson out to entertain them, laughing at the man who once terrified them. They mocked his blindness. They praised their God for his defeat. And in that moment, standing between the pillars of the building, Samson whispered a prayer. It wasn't a proud prayer. It wasn't demanding. It wasn't filled with excuses. It was simple, honest, desperate. Samson asked God for strength one last time, not for his own glory, but to fulfill the purpose he had abandoned. And God answered. With renewed strength, Samson pushed against the pillars, and the building collapsed. In his final act, he defeated more enemies than he had in his entire life. His story ended, not in fame, but in fulfillment. Not in pride, but in surrender. Samson's life leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. Gifts can be dangerous when they are not protected by discipline. Strength can blind us if we stop honoring its source. Small compromises can quietly undo great callings. And grace should never be mistaken for permission. But his story also carries hope. Because even after failure, God still listened. Even after loss, God still worked. Even when Samson fell hard, God was not finished. If you've been gifted, guard it. If you've been warned, listen. And if you've fallen, don't believe the lie that it's over. Redemption doesn't always erase consequences, but it can still restore purpose. The same God who met Samson in his weakness still meets people today in quiet prayers, broken places, and moments of surrender. Sometimes strength isn't found in standing tall. Sometimes it's found in finally kneeling down.